IBM was a very interesting culture. I think it's worth going back to the days of Tom Watson Sr. and to the days before 1956. 1956 was their antitrust loss, where they had to stop renting computers. They had to also sell them. But before that time, there was this tremendous motivated interest in keeping the customer happy. And then the reason the customer was kept happy was that the commission structure, as I understand it, for a salesman, the salesman who got an order for a new piece of rental equipment received half of the commission. The salesman who had the territory when the equipment was delivered, which might be a year or two later, got the other half of the commission. The salesman who had the territory when the customer said, "Take it back, I don't want to rent it anymore," had all of the commission deducted from his account, no matter how long the equipment had been out there. The only escape for the salesman was legal bankruptcy of the customer. Therefore, every salesman had this territory with the threat of a customer turning it back and having all the commission taken off his account. And every salesman was interested not only in selling equipment, but making sure that every customer kept what they had. And this was the basis, really, of their powerful interest in customers. And their service department was the same way. If a customer had a problem, you fixed it now, not tomorrow. And Tom Watson Jr. explained this to a group he was lecturing to at MIT. I'm only surprised that he told it. Not that the story certainly would be true, but I'm a little surprised he told it. He told the case of a customer who had his payroll to get out the next day. He had an equipment failure problem. The service manager sent somebody to fix it. The repairman became violently ill, called his boss, said, "I just can't do it, you've got to send somebody else." And the service manager said, "All right, I'll send somebody tomorrow morning." And Tom Watson said the next week he no longer worked for IBM. You don't do it tomorrow morning, you do it now. And that's the way they operate. And they had that culture. But they also had the strongest, not invented here, attitude down inside the company that I've ever seen. If IBM didn't do it, it couldn't possibly be of any value. And we forced them to put the magnetic core memory in the Sage system computers at the same time that they were still using Williams tubes in their first round of real digital computers that they sent out to industry. But at the top of the company, there was none of this not invented here. In other words, there was a complete break between the top of the company and the inside on that attitude. I had a president of a division in IBM once say that at his level, nobody ever knew whether the top management supported them or not. Furthermore, that the turnover in that top echelon below the very top at that time was about 18 months. But if you were found wanting, you didn't go out. You dropped down 2 or 3 levels and came up again. And only the weakest ones went out and became heads of competition. So they had a system that created leaders more than they could use, where a lot of companies can't create enough to use. Anyway, to illustrate this break, later on, IBM had gotten to the point of creating a new commercial system that was going to take the place in the market that the 704 system eventually did. And it was designed, and it was to the point where its specifications were being released to customers. And it was headed straight for production. And at the top, at the level of the Watsons, the heads of big customers were saying, "It's not what we want, it's not going to fly." And that was taken seriously. And I think Watson Jr. called a big meeting of all the people involved in designing that system. They probably thought they were going to be complimented for their wonderful job. He said, "You've been doing a splendid job. We appreciate what you're doing. We've heard this really isn't going to be satisfactory, and as of today, the program is canceled. And your head, who has been running this, will be deputy to somebody else whose ideas we will back for this round." $50 million down the drain. But and the Watsons ran that company as if they owned it, where I don't think they ever owned more than a few percent of the stock. But they ran it as if they owned it. And it made a tremendous difference in the way the company functioned. They were not subservient to the market. They were not, to the whims of the market. They were not subservient to the financial sector. They ran it for the customers, and they meant it. And that's one of the reasons why we went to them. It was clear that they had an attitude that at the top, you had to fight that attitude in the inside. We had that problem internally, but we never had that problem of getting what we wanted at the top. They had a system out on the Williams too. It was unreliable. It was causing problems. And they were designing their next one the same way, with the random magnetic memory already going down the road of the Sage system computers. And again, Watson, and they said it's not expensive. It's cheaper. And we can do this at less cost. And Watson is on record, I think maybe in his book, Father, Son, and Company. I think the story is there. He got up in front of the engineers and said, do you want something that works? You will use magnetic core memory, pay the price, and get to it. In other words, it was again from the top where he realized this was what had to be done, and he was basically chastising his organization for its not invented here attitude. And at that point, they did shift over and began to build the really mainstream computers that they built their reputation for the next few decades on.